Welcome back into the Bhikshu Auditorium. I feel completely recharged. I don't know about you. The wonderful part about today has been, even though we've been together since the morning, the sessions have been so exciting that I personally feel quite motivated and rejuvenated, and the cup of tea certainly helped as well. We now have for our next session the talk on circular economy and sustainability, 3 speakers. After they have given their presentations, we'll request you for some question-answer sessions. And that will be followed by a half-hour cultural performance where you'll have some vibrant colors of India. And through that also some moments to think about the Anuvrat philosophy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Mrs. Kiran Mehra-Kerpelman, who is the Director, UN Information Center for India and Bhutan. She took over in February 2011, and ever since then has completely revolutionized the work, the way that the UN Information Center works. In fact, she's actually calling it the UN India Connect. So UNIC has a new meaning altogether. She's looking to connect very intensely with the rural population. She's using a lot of social media. Essentially, she's decided that her mandate is to reach out. Whatever the vehicle is, she's got to reach out. There's got to be awareness, and what better time than this? They've just had their, on the 23rd, they had the UN leaders climate change meeting. And so I think at this point of time, it's appropriate to have our Ambassador for Peace. She was awarded this title by the Universal Peace Foundation. She also received the Gandhi Seva Medal from the Gandhi Global Family. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kiran Mehra-Kerpelman. Om Arham.
Well, after that introduction, thank you so much. Distinguished delegates at this international conference summoned by Anuvrat. The UN Information Center has connected to Anuvrat many times in the past. During Acharya Tulsi's time, my predecessors at UNIC have participated in similar seminars, both in Delhi and in Jaipur, which is why I am so delighted to be here, to connect once again with you with some thoughts on climate change, sustainability, and how they impact the future we want, the future we all want. Just the day before yesterday, or the day before that, on 23rd September, the UN Secretary General summoned a climate summit at which over 100 heads of state and government spoke and pledged on taking action on climate change issues. At the summit, climate change became, excuse the pun, a hot global agenda. The UN Secretary General has striven tirelessly to ensure that climate change stays at the top of the leaders' agendas. And under his leadership, governments have advanced international efforts to fight, mitigate, and adapt to climate change. Through the climate conference COP in Cancun in 2010, where governments adopted the Cancun agreements, forming the basis for the largest ever collective effort to reduce carbon emissions and address the long-term challenges of climate change. To Durban in 2011, where the Durban platform set the path towards a new legally binding agreement applicable to all, committed governments to a second commitment period for the Kyoto Protocol and launched the Green Climate Fund. It has indeed been a challenge for the international community, a lot of hard work and tough negotiations. But it's not all talk and hot air. While working to build consensus for action at the international level, the Secretary General is also leading initiatives that promote effective action at the local and national levels to tackle climate change. Among them are his campaigns for sustainable energy for all, which seeks to achieve 3 interlinked goals by 2030. Universal access to modern energy, doubling energy efficiency, and doubling the share of renewable energy. The Zero Hunger Challenge that urges farmers, agri-businesses, cooperatives, governments, unions, and civil society to establish standards for sustainability and be accountable for their observance. Encourage the universal adoption of sustainable and climate-resilient agriculture practices. Pursue cross-sectoral policies and implement the responsible governance of land, fisheries, and forests. Caring for Climate initiative that provides a framework for business leaders to advance practical solutions and help shape public policy as well as public attitudes. Caring for Climate has been endorsed by nearly 350 companies from 65 countries. Mobilizing climate finance. Financing for climate change is one of the top priorities of the Secretary General's work. He encourages and urges investors to lend their support for climate change initiatives to provide solutions to climate-affected communities around the world. The Secretary General is working with governments to meet their agreement to mobilize $100 billion per year by 2020 in new and additional finance, and is committed to helping operationalize the Green Climate Fund so that the fund can play a major role in delivering long-term climate finance. Mr. Ban has also been working with the private sector, which has the creativity and resources to advance the role of business in addressing climate change. Climate change and sustainable development. At the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio +20 in Brazil in June 2012, under the Secretary General's leadership, member states agreed to clear and practical measures for implementing sustainable development and addressing climate change, including by promoting more sustainable agriculture, enhancing resilience to climate change, improving energy efficiency, addressing ocean acidification, and enhancing strategies that integrate disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation into decision-making. It's against this background of incremental action that the Climate Summit was convened in New York. Opening the summit on the 23rd, UN Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon said, "Climate change is the defining issue of our age. It is defining our present. Our response will define our future. To ride this storm, we need all hands on deck." Today, the dreams of people throughout the world hang in balance. Climate change threatens hard-won peace, prosperity, and opportunity for billions of people. Today, we must set the world on a new course. That is why we are here today, he said. We need a clear vision. The human, environmental, and financial cost of climate change is fast becoming unbearable. We have never faced such a challenge, nor have we encountered such great opportunity. A low-carbon, climate-resilient future will be a better future. Cleaner, healthier, fairer, more stable. Not for some, but for all. There is only one thing in the way. Us, we. I am asking you to lead, he said. We must cut emissions. Science says they must peak by 2020 and decline sharply thereafter. By the end of this century, we must be carbon neutral. We must not emit more carbon than our planet can absorb. No one is immune from climate change, so we must invest in climate-resilient societies that protect all, especially the most vulnerable. I ask all governments, he said, to commit to a meaningful, universal climate agreement in Paris in 2015 and to do their fair share to limit global temperature rise to less than 2 degrees Celsius. To do that, we must work together to mobilize money and move markets. Let us invest in the climate solutions available to us today. Economists have shown that this comes at minimal extra cost, while the benefits to our people and our planet are monumental. We need all public finance institutions to step up to the challenge, and we need to bring private finance from the sidelines. We must begin to capitalize the Green Climate Fund, and we must meet the broader $100 billion a year pledge made in Copenhagen. Let us also put a price on carbon. There is no more powerful way to drive the market transformation we need. All these actions demand collaboration, cooperation, and coalitions today and all the way through to the Paris Agreement next year. The United Nations is doing its part. We will be climate neutral by 2020. All around the world, people are acting. In cities around the world, hundreds of thousands of people are calling for action. They are demanding that leaders lead. That's end of the opening statement by the UN Secretary General. Friends, as the summit concluded, world leaders reaffirmed their determination to limit global temperature rise to less than the 2 degrees Celsius required by cutting emissions. Many leaders from all regions and all levels of economic development advocated for a peak in greenhouse gas emissions before 2020, decisively reduced emissions thereafter, and climate neutrality in the second half of this century. We heard commitments from many countries to cut emissions. In addition, coalitions were announced in the areas of forestry, energy efficiency, and transportation. And leaders of the oil and gas industry, along with the national governments and civil society organizations, made a historic commitment to identify and reduce methane emissions by 2020. Second, on finance, public and private sources showed the way forward for mobilizing the finance we need. Leaders expressed strong support for the Green Climate Fund. Many leaders called for the fund's initial capitalization at an amount no less than $10 billion. A total of $2.3 billion was pledged towards the fund's initial capitalization, and others committed contributions by November 2014. A new coalition of governments, business, finance, multilateral development banks, and civil society leaders announced their commitment to mobilize upwards of $200 billion for financing low carbon and climate resilient development. Private banks announced they would issue $20 billion of green bonds and that they would double the market to $50 billion by 2015, next year. The insurance industry committed to doubling its green investments to $82 billion by the same date, by next year. A coalition of institutional investors committed to decarbonize $100 billion by December 2015, and to measure and disclose the carbon footprint of at least $500 billion in investments. All of this by next year. Third, carbon pricing. This is one of the most powerful tools available for reducing emissions and generating sustainable development and growth. Many leaders from government and business supported putting a price on carbon through various instruments and called for intensified efforts to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. 30 companies announced their alignment with the Caring for Climate business leadership criteria on carbon pricing. And a number of leaders agreed to join a new carbon pricing leadership coalition to drive action aimed at strengthening carbon-priced policies and redirecting investment. Fourth, We heard how strengthening resilience, both climate and financial, is a smart and essential investment. Adaptation needs are growing, particularly for the least developed countries and small island developing states, which are most at risk and need most international support. Leaders agreed to strengthen and scale up the risk financing mechanisms for Africa and the Caribbean. A comprehensive climate risk resilience initiative was also launched to support Pacific small island developing states. Leaders from the insurance industry, representing $30 trillion in assets and investments, committed to creating a climate risk investment framework for industry-wide adoption by the end of next year. Fifth, new coalitions are forming to meet the full scope of the climate challenge. The first Global Agricultural Alliance was launched to enable 500 million farmers worldwide to practice climate-smart agriculture by 2030. Leaders of the oil and gas industry, along with national governments and civil society organizations, made a historic commitment to identify and reduce methane emissions by 2020. A new compact of mayors representing 200 cities with a combined population of 400 million people pledged new commitments to reduce annual emissions by between 12.4 and 16.4%. Leaders from pension funds committed to decarbonizing investments worth $100 billion and disclosing the carbon footprint of investments worth $500 billion. Friends, day before yesterday's summit has shown that we can rise to the climate challenge. Let us look back on this summit as the day, 23rd September 2014, we decided as a human family to put our house in order to make it livable for future generations. As the UN Secretary General eloquently put it, there is no time to lose. If we do not take action now, we will have to pay much more. There is no plan B because we do not have a planet B. Thank you for your attention.